How did the universe put you and Maria in the same
Together.
room? Yeah.
So I left the Convention and Visitor Bureau and I went to work for an organization called Concilio. At that time, it was considered the Council of Spanish-Speaking Organizations, one of the oldest Latino organizations in the city of Philadelphia. And Concilio's mission was basically to ensure that Latinos were connected to resources, government, health, education, housing. And I went to be their business manager of a division where we promoted the Puerto Rican Festival, the culture and the history of Puerto Ricans in the city of Philadelphia. What's interesting is that at that time, I didn't want to be Puerto Rican either. Right? I know that my parents were Puerto Rican. My parents always wanted us to speak Spanish at home. I would consistently fight with that and say, I don't want to speak Spanish, I want to speak English. I'm an American, I'm born and raised here. Mm-hmm. I'm from Puerto Rican descent. And
you had an identity crisis of sorts.
Yes. The last smack in my mouth I got was at 16, and it was because I said to my dad, I don't want to be Puerto Rican.
Oh, wow.
And I'm not going to speak that language, I'm going to speak my language. Mm-hmm. And my dad said, you are going to speak this language as long as you live in this house, because it is our language. And you will be proud of who you are. You don't have to be who people say you are. So working at Concilio and having my dad continue to enforce that we needed to be proud of who we are really changed how I thought. Right? Promoting the culture, learning about us as a community in this city really changed there at Concilio through that leadership. It was through that leadership that I met María Quiñones, who at that time was the executive director of the Puerto Rico Federal Affairs Administration. And at that time, they were focused on voter registration and ensuring that Latinos, specifically Puerto Ricans, in the city of Philadelphia were registered to vote and were civically engaged. She wins that election that May, and then in the general in November, after she won that election, she met with me shortly after that, and she asked me to come work for her. And that's how I get introduced to city politics.
It sounds very typically Maria. She identifies as a Latino talent, and she's like, you know what? You're good. Come work for me. Maria's very good at that.
Yes.
And what were your thoughts at the time?
I thought, this woman is crazy. I don't know anything about politics. I don't even know what a council person does. I've never reached out to my council person. I said that my dad led us as a family, and so the only thing I knew about politics was that on election day, mom and dad would say, we're going to vote, and this is who we're going to vote for. And
so what were those few first days in government like? You had never done government work.
I had never done government work. The November election was a really rough election. And so transitioning into government and walking into the office, our first office was room 592. And we walked in to desk. There was not a pencil, there was not a paper clip, there was not a file or a transition book that they gave us. There was no manual. There was just
how to run government for dummies.
I wish that we would have that. There was nothing. There was just a blank space. But she was always optimistic and ready to go. She said, we're gonna create our own rules here. As long as we're not breaking any rules, as long as we're not doing anything that's illegal, we're gonna run this office the way we know how and the way we know that our community deserves.
So that was the standard set.
That was walking in the door. And that's what we did. I worked with her 2008, January of 2008 is when we walked in. She got sworn in. And when I walked out at the end of 2018, the policy that she put in place on day one, which was, we will make sure that we operate in this office in the best interest of the community, has always been. I think till the day she walked out of that office, she has always made sure that that people were first. And that's what she taught me, and that's what she taught the staff, and that's what the expectation of me was, leading her staff. It was always make sure that the community is first. I think it put me in very difficult situations many times. I oftentimes would say to her, this is not right. We can't do this. they shouldn't be saying that, or they shouldn't be doing that, or why is this person putting this piece of legislation out? I've said before that my work in Maria's office was never heavy on policy and legislation. My responsibility was more on public safety and making sure that the office administratively was operated appropriately and that community residents were served and that they were informed.
Do you remember any specific instance where you were like, no, that's not what we're hearing, that's not the concern, that's not the way this bill should go?
Yeah.
Or do you have any memories, any recollections?
I do. I remember, I think she even talks about this often too. There was questions about how much funding could be put into some of our pools, our city pools. And I think everyone in the city knows that our parks and recreation centers are important to our communities. And in some communities, our city pools are the only opportunity for people to get out. And they were considering shutting it down, closing the pool. And the councilwoman was trying to figure out where we could get funding to be able to make the necessary repairs. And at one point she thought, well, we're gonna have to shut that down. And I said, we can't do that. And she said, well, we don't have the money, we have to do that. And I said, we cannot do that. The people need that pool. And the people were calling us and saying, please don't close the pool. And she said, we don't have the money. And I said, I'm gonna organize the community and protest against you. I may get fired, I may get in a lot of trouble, but that pool cannot be closed. We need that.
What was her response?
I don't think she believed that I would even say something like that, right? I was supposed to be on her team, and I was on her team. I was on her team because I knew that she really believed in what people needed.
Yeah. She needed to hear it. Yeah.
Yeah. But she needed to hear that it was as important to me as it was to the people, and that ultimately her responsibility was to the people. And so, if we find money in government for other things, then we needed to find money at that particular time for that particular community. And she did what she needed to do. But that pool's open today, right?
Save the pool.
Yeah, and I think that, Maria always gave her staff, not only me as her chief, but everyone else in her staff, the opportunity to come in and challenge her or disagree, right? And she would listen, and sometimes she adjusted her way of thinking, and other times she said, I'm sorry, but we can't do it that way.